They're lying about wildfires in the United States. Did 2020 really set a new record for U.S. acreage burned in wildfires? Is it one of the hottest on record, too? They're lying, my friends. This is freaking evil. This is from the Hill, all right? Change in America. 2020, and they got this picture. We're all going to burn in a pit of hell. I'm telling you, it's a religious. This is religion for these people. All right, so we're going to go into this a little bit, and we're going to say wildfires have burned a total of 10.3 million acres so far in 2020. That breaks the previous record of 2015. No, we're all going to burn. There's a third year on record that wildfires have burned more than 10 million acres, with all three taking place since 2015. Is that true? So let's think about this. Let's see. All right, last year I set a record for my income. My business set a record in my income last year in 2020. It's the most money we've ever made on record for heritage wealth planning. So that would tell you something. On top of that, the year before that was the best I ever had as well. So in 2019 I set a record for my most income ever made for heritage wealth planning. Even 2018 was a record as the most ever made in money for 2018 for heritage wealth planning. So the three most recent years are all records for the money I made for heritage wealth planning. And you can see it's progressively going up, 2018, 2019, 2020. Why? Because the record just started in 2018. There was no heritage wealth planning in 2017. So any year I made money right out the gate was a record, because the record was only for the previous year. There was no record, if that made sense. So literally I made, $24,000 roughly in 2018, which is a record. Wasn't much money, but it's a record. 2019 I did significantly better. 2020 I did significantly better. The point being is, if you're using a record with your fewer years that you've, quote, recorded, or you've actually doctored the evidence, you're going to set records. But I mean, check this out, man. All right, so I just want to show you. Let's see if they show the graph here. No, they don't even show the graph. All right, so they don't even say anything about it. This is the Hill. Clown show material. The U.S. set a new record for number of acres burned by wildfires as 2020 saw some of the hottest months on record. Large parts of the western U.S. experienced severe drought. Oh, no. But what's even scarier? Check this out, man. No wonder why these people are so freaking scared to live, to breathe. Will global COVID-19 lockdowns help the climate change crisis? There are 10 countries most at risk for the effects of climate change. The 10 countries most likely to survive the imminent threats of climate change. First, climate warnings on gas pumps. And we got here, the beautiful elephant. Herd of 18 wild elephants may have been killed by lightning strike. Let's see. Critically endangered fossil fuels dragged up from the deep by shark hunters. They're critically endangered. There's another thing in here too, though. There was something else in there. They had another one. They changed this from yesterday, which is too bad. It was just doom and gloom stuff. It's crazy. All right, let me show you why this is all fake. All right, so let's go here. We go to what's up with that. Inconvenient wildlife data has been disappeared by the National Interagency Fire Center. Oh, interesting. National Interagency Fire Center hides data prior to 1983, turning a downward trend into an upward trend. So remember, we go back to Hill. Remember what they say. 2020, we had 10 million acres burned. That set a record, which was started in 2015, but it wasn't. Not even close. So I wonder if we can click this guy. Hold on a second. I think we can. Yeah, right there. All right. So let's see what we... Oh, man, that's not very good. Can I make this bigger? Look at that, baby. Yeah, let's see. Total acres right there. 10. It's hard to see. Can I do it? Oh, there we go. Sweet. Look at that. I'm not sure what that says, but there we go. We got 10, I'm assuming this is 10 million acres. Yeah, right there. Yep, 10 million acres right there. 20, 30, 40, 50. So look at that, 1926 to 19, right there. Basically 1952. Every year we had more than 10 million acres of wildfires. Every year, burned. Some years we had more than 200 times, or twice the double of that. Some years we had triple, some years we had quintuple that. But they got rid of everything starting from 1983. Why 1983, you ask? Well, look at that. 1983, the lowest one, the lowest on record. What caused that? So let's keep it. It's just fake. This whole thing, everything is fake. It's crazy. Everything is fake. All right, hold on just a second. We get that. All right, here we go. It's nuts. All right. The National Fire Center has been the keeper of U.S. wildfire data for decades, tracking both the number of wildfires and acreage burned all the way back to 1926. However, making that entire data set public for decades. Now, in a blatant act of cherry picking, it disappeared a portion of it and only showed data from 1983. Fortunately, the internet never forgets. Oh, thank goodness. Why would they do this? The answer is simple. Prior to 1983 shows that U.S. wildfires were far worse, both in frequency and in total acreage burned. By disappearing all data prior to 1983, which just happens to be the lowest point in the data set, now all of a sudden we get a positive slope of worsening wildfire, aligning with increased global temperatures, which is perfect for claiming that global warming, we can say global warming if we have increased global temperatures, or climate change if we don't, is making wildfires worse. Freaking crazy, man. Clearly, wildfires were much worse at the other part. And don't forget, the interesting thing is we had huge droughts in the 20s and the 30s, huge temperature increases, people dying, never mind the freaking Oklahoma stuff, all over. We had huge droughts, huge temperature increases. We haven't come close to that since. The 1920s and 1930s were devastating for humanity, at least in the United States. Clearly, wildfires were far worse in the past, and clearly, now the data tells us an entirely different story when showing only post-1983. The new story told by the sanitized data is in alignment with the irrational screeching of climate alarmists that wildfires are driven by climate change. The wholesale erasure of important public data stinks, but in today's narrative control culture that wants to rid us of anything that might be inconvenient, it isn't surprising. Back in 2011, when this data was first presented by these guys, it's simply presented as is. They say only this. Figures prior to 1983 may be revised as the NICC revises its historical data, or verifies historical data. That was like 10 years ago. And in 2018, they added a new caveat. The National Interagency Coordination Center compiles an annual wildfire statistics for federal and state agencies. This info is provided through situation reports, which have been used for several decades. Prior to 1983, sources for these figures are not known and cannot be confirmed. They were not derived from the current situation reporting process. As a result, the figures prior to 1983 should not be compared to later data. Weird. According to the Wayback Machine, that caveat first appeared on the webpage somewhere between January 14th and March 7th of 2018. Why? Curiously, that caveat appeared just a few weeks after I drew a wide attention to the issue in December 2017 with an article citing the NIFC data saying, is climate change really the culprit causing California's wildfires? It seems they received some blowback from the idea that their data, when plotted, clearly showed wildfires to be far worse in the past, completely blowing the global warming climate change wildfire connection out of the water. But here's what they say now. Prior to 1983, the federal wildland fire agencies did not track official wildfire data using current reporting processes. You think? You know what else we didn't track using current reporting processes? Global temperatures. You know why? We didn't have satellites. No satellites back then. So how are we using current processes to get a gauge of a rate in global warming? We had no satellite data. How can you do that? Oh, tree rings. Okay, but that's not current reporting processes, is it now? It's weird how these guys, it's not weird, it's sickening how these guys operate, but they get away with it because they get a media of steel. Yay, yay! It's crazy, man. Crazy. People are evil. That's your government too, by the way. On top of that, we know for a fact the 20s and 30s were extraordinarily hot, extraordinarily high droughts, extraordinarily wildfires. So even if they weren't using the current reporting process, it doesn't take a freaking brain, a PhD, to say, and a PhD in anthropology, for instance, to say, it was hot, a lot more forest back there, probably a lot more wildfires. That's not rocket science a thing, that's for damn sure. These guys are just, man. Not only is this an lie of omission, it's ridiculous. Their agenda is clear. When the data was first published, they only advised that some data might be revised as they verify historical data. Well, they didn't revise it, they eliminated it. There was no published concern back then that the data might be invalid or that we shouldn't use it. Besides, the data is very simple. A count of the number of fires and the number of acres burned. That isn't that hard to validate. What's worse is this data has been trusted for decades in almost every news story about any wildfire that ever occurred in the U.S. In virtually every news story about a wildfire, the number of acres burned, the number the press uses in the story, without it, there is no scale of severity of the fire. Similarly, for every story about what a bad fire season we've had, the press cites a number of fires as well as the acreage burned. All right? And now, after decades of that data being provided to the press and public and nearly a decade of these guys making it publicly available on their website, they want us to believe it's now unreliable? What they're doing is essentially labeling every firefighter, every fire captain, every forester, and every smoke jumper who has fought wildfires for decades as being untrustworthy in their assessment and measurement of this critical yet simple fire data. I'll take data from the people on the scene over a government bureaucrat, especially wherever the hell these guys are, certainly in D.C., any day of the week. The whole affair is outrageous. But even more outrageous is that they aren't at all transparent as the reason they changed. They say the data prior to 1983, but there's no citation of a study, no methodology given, no rationale for the removal. Why 1982 is no longer? Because they came up with some, there's nothing. They just say, we're using 1983. They're cherry picking. That's not science, it's not statistics, it's not even sensible, but it's what's happening. Applying the entire data set before it was sent off into the Orwellian world of the government we're in here now gives us some hints as to why this is done and how wildfire and weather patterns have been inextricably linked for decades. Note that figure 2 below combined the number of fires and number of acres burns. All right, so we got record heat drought in the U.S. Dust Bowl, 1930 and 1941. Number of fires right there. Or acres burned right there. Number of fires is in blue. Number of acres burned is in orange. All right, so here, Dust Bowl record heat and drought in 1930 and 1941. Major U.S. drought, 1976 and 1978, and that's during the global cooling period too, which is interesting because we had lots of global cooling in the U.S. in the 70s for sure. And we had number of fires, but not much acres. I wonder if it's because we had global cooling, but tons of fires, just not that much acres. Then Super El Nino of the 1982 Western U.S. was very wet, and the lowest point in the record going back to 1926. So we've had an increasing since then. Well, yeah, if you're increasing it from here, my goodness, man. If you're increasing it from here, going back to 1954, is 10 million and 10 million. Clearly, what they have done is by stating data prior to 1983 is unreliable, is not just hiding or actually disappearing it, is not just hiding important history, but cherry picking a data point that is the lowest in the entire record to ensure that an upwards trend exists. Yeah, it's crazy. It seems to me that they very likely caved to pressure from climate activists to disappear this inconvenient data. By erasing the past, they have become trustworthy as a NASA, as a NOAA. It's the whole thing's not. This is not erasure, not just unscientific as evil. It's dishonest and possibly fraudulent. Yeah. And you can, for posterity, the entire set can be downloaded here, which you're going to want to download because they're going to get rid of it, man. Here's an analysis paper from 2015 using the same data that is on the U.S. Forest Service website. These guys are evil, man. They're scaring the living bejesus out of people. And I saw something here. One second. Here we got a record of 37 years, and they say prior to 1980. Remember, this wasn't here before. This right here. Prior to 1983, the federal wildlands data. The federal wildland fire agencies did not track official data using current reporting process. As a result, there was no official data prior to 1983 on this site. Dude, this is complete Orwellian crap. There was no official data prior to that's freaking scary. This is scary stuff, man. Do they give a reason why they stopped? No, nothing. They don't give any reason at all. Isn't that freaking crazy? There was no official data prior to 1983 posted on this site. Yeah, just because you took it off. You eliminated. You're George Orwell. You're Big Brother. And you should be freaking fired because this is evil stuff. And you're scaring the hell out of people. Some of these people are killing themselves. All right, we'll see you.